Testing for Zoom room. Can the lay people in the Zoom room hear me? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up there. Very good. Okay. Yeah, I think it's fine. So after the Dhamma Talk request, and she'll turn the mic off, then I'll turn that mic on.
Okay.
Then we'll be good.
I'll remind her to turn her mic on.
Yeah, good.
This moving part.
Are you giving an introduction before the class?
Yeah, and I'll cue her. Would you be able to press 2 on that to zoom it back out? It's zoomed in on me right now. Thank you. One thing also is for Doug, during his talk, my mic will need to be turned down.
Okay.
So I think that'll be the best for the YouTube. So just for everybody who's starting to gather together in about 5 minutes, we'll formally pay respects to Ajahn Amaro, and then we'll have him highlighted on the screen after that time. And for us in the hall, it's going to be a little bit strange in that we'll actually be bowing toward the camera to give Ajahn Amaro the effect of us bowing toward him. So we'll just see how that goes. Toward the that overhead camera there. Even though visually he'll be right here next to us in the room. Start. We'll before Ajahn Amaro is highlighted as a big screen, we'll pay respects to him. I'll give a little introduction, and then Susan's going to request the Dhamma Talk.
Okay, great.
Ajahn Yoniko, so you'll start with the paying of respects.
I'll start with the paying of respects once everybody comes back together. Yeah.
I keep forgetting to look on my schedule. Am I on that?
Q&A. I think you are.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Is Lumpur on the Q&A today? Yeah. Okay.
And Lumpara Ajahn Yoniko will have those to give to you just before the Q. Ajahn Yoniko will have those to give to you just before the session.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll print those out just
Yeah,
before.
great.
Ajahn Yoniko, one more quick question. Do we want to be in speaker view for the screen? Or can we not?
I will do that. Yeah, so that we'll see him. Yeah, I'll put mine on speaker view, and then we'll all see him there. I can actually do that right now. I see he's not. Oh wait, he's not pinned yet.
I'm going to spotlight him along with the Dhamma Hall, along with your screen.
Oh, perfect.
As soon as you begin.
Okay, and then I'll put it on
For the
speaker
paying
view.
of respects, so we're all spotlighting.
Okay, perfect.
Okay? When you begin speaking.
So, welcome to Ajahn Amaro, and respectful greetings. We've got those of us in the hall here, some of the monastic sangha is here, and also there's lay people, people who are living in the monastery right now, staying as overnight guests in the hall, and then there's also all of the day visitors, about 20 day visitors outside. And so just to begin, I'd like to just, with the monastics who are present, we can just formally pay respects to Ajahn Amaro, and we'll be bowing to that overhead camera right there. Yeah, bow. And thank you so much for agreeing to this. And it's quite wonderful. Ajahn Amaro, co-founder of Abhayagiri, along with Lumpur Pasano, so of course has all those experiences from the early days. And without further ado, we'll have Susan request the Dhamma Talk. Press 9.
The Brahma god, Sahapati, Lord of the world, with palms joined in reverence, requested a Dhamma favor. Beings are here, but with little dust in their eyes. Pray, teach the Dhamma out of compassion for them.
First of all, I pay my respects to Lumpur Prasanno, even though I'm seeing myself on a screen. But I would offer my 3 bows to you, Lumpur. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I hope everyone can hear me clearly enough. Yes, very good. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to celebrate 25 years of Abhayagiri Monastery with you all. I'm here at Amravati. I feel this the seat that I'm in is kind of like a pilot's chair, since I'm in California, but I'm also I've been leading events in Geneva, in Delhi, in Kuala Lumpur, and then people joining in from all around the planet. Probably this evening, there's quite a few people from many different countries around the world plugging into this. So I am very happy to be in this pilot's chair once again and to be sharing this opportunity with you. It's afternoon in California. Here in England, it's just after 9 o'clock in the evening. It's getting towards midsummer, so it's still broad daylight here. Very early mornings and late evenings at this time in southern England. So recollecting the foundation of Abhayagiri, I was chatting with Ajahn Yaniko before, saying, what would you like me to talk about? You hum it and I'll play it. So I could talk about a great variety of different things, but I thought perhaps something of the origins of the monastery would be helpful to address first of all. Without going into too much, I know I'm prone to giving more detail than necessary. So with that in mind, I'll try to keep to the essence. But I would say Abhayagiri really began with Luang Por Sumedho responding to invitations from Jack Cornfield to go to California and teach when Jack had moved over from Insight Meditation Society, and he would invite Ajahn Sumedho to teach in California each year, and then Luang Por would go and visit his parents who were living down in San Diego, and his sister and brother-in-law were there as well. So through the early 80s, 81, 82, 83, 84, and so on, Luang Por was coming to California every year, and it was quite clear by the time he got to the mid-80s that there was a number of people who wanted to practice beyond the bounds of just the meditation retreats or listening to Dhamma talks, but wanted to, have a monastery and the sort of full spectrum of the Theravada mode of practice in their midst. And so that by the time we got to about 1986, then Luang Por felt there was a group of people gathered in the Bay Area who really understood what monasteries were for. They had a good sense of what he was teaching and were keen to have a monastery founded in their area. So we first heard about this in England at the full moon gathering at the end of the winter retreat in 1986, and Luang Por Sumedho made the statement to the community that he was open to the idea of starting a monastery, first of all in Switzerland, where he'd been visiting for many years, and also in California. So that was the first public statement, sort of dropping the not exactly the cat amongst the pigeons, but certainly casting the bread upon the waters. Maybe that's a better way of talking about it. So that was really the first time the idea of a monastery in California was launched into the group mind. So a few times during that period, from the early 80s, Luang Por Sumedho had spoken of his association with Master Hsuan Hua and the City of 10,000 Buddhas, and how within that Northern Buddhist tradition there was very close affinities, the style of practice even though they had some different scriptural background in terms of their sutras, the Vinaya practice was very, very similar, and also the use of the austere practices, what we call the Dhutangas, was very, very close. It was very much a Dhutanga tradition, say, Buddhist monastic community. So there was a lot of say, empathy and a mutual understanding, mutual respect that had grown up between the community of Ajahn Sumedho, Amravati, Chithurst, the branches that were being established here in Britain and Europe, and then also with that community in California. So that took shape in the late 80s with Lumpur Sumedho being invited to help conduct an ordination ceremony. Master Hua is a monk who, even though we don't handle money, he puts his money where his mouth is, and he wanted to have he got permission to be a preceptor. They organized an ordination ceremony at City of 10,000 Buddhas, and they paid for tickets for Lumpur Sumedho and 9 other monks to fly over to California to join in with the ordination ceremony. So that was like the first time our communities came close together as a larger body of people. And then the following year, Lumpur Sumedho invited Master Hua and a large group of his Sangha to come to our monasteries in England. So those of you who've seen photographs of Master Hua and nuns and monks from his community at Chithurst, Amravati, that was 1989 was the large visit to these communities. So that really brought us closer together as a kind of a pair of ventures. The momentum for developing a monastery, then at the same time that was growing, and in I think it was December of 1988, Lumpur Sumedho sat down with half a dozen people in San Francisco, Mark Lieberman, Debbie Stamp, Daniel Barnes, Zena Janowski, Zita Rothman, and I think Susan Barber was brought in at the last minutes. I think she might be listening in this evening. I think I'm not sure if she was there at that first meeting in 1988, but she was eventually brought in as a board member. She often would say that she came along to cook the meal, didn't have much of a connection with Theravada Buddhism, but she liked these monks. She came along to offer the meal, and somehow she found herself a board member by the time the meal was over. Debbie Stamp can correct me on that if I've got the dates and facts wrong. But anyway, that was the December of '88. Sangapala was formed as a little charitable trust to create the ground for making an invitation for the community to begin. So that then developed, and then in 1990, Lumpur Sumedho made a visit with 2 nuns, Ajahn Sundara and Sister Jyotika, and myself to the Bay Area. Previously, I hadn't been involved at all. I'd been around with Master Hua and the community coming to visit England, but there was quite a number of American monks in our community. There was Ajahn Nando, Ajahn Ajito, Ajahn Prabhakaro, there was also other senior teaching monks. Ajahn Sujito had been over to America once or twice. Ajahn Kirisara was a very gifted teacher, also American. So I had no clue that I was going to be involved in this project at all, because I assumed that if Lumpur Sumedho starts something up in the States, an American would be one who leads it. But so I was sitting having a cup of coffee with him sometime in late '89, just sort of, as I would often do, pop round after the morning meditation and sort out monastery business. And so we're just chatting with him, and he was planning this visit in 1990. And he said, I'm going to take a couple of nuns, and then I'll take one of the monks, and then we'll come back to England, and I'll leave the monk there to have a temporary vihara in San Francisco, and we'll see how things go with the idea of a monastery, see whether the Californians really take to that. And I blithely asked the question, so who are you thinking of taking along? Which monk are you thinking of taking? And he looked at me and said, actually, you, Venerable. So that was a surprise. And so I realized my fate / karma / calendar was going to be tilted in that direction for time to come. So just to then briefly cover the following years, I came with Lumpur that year, and then 91, 92, 93, 94. Then I would come for a few months each year. The Sangha Debbie and Mark Lieberman, Susan Barber, Daniel Barnes, and other members of the group would very diligently set up a temporary vihara in San Francisco. I'd come over, I would teach in the city, give a few day-longs, and then go back to England. So it was also a time of great change and a bit of turbulence in our community. A number of the senior Ajahns had left during that time. Quite a number of the Americans, Ajahn Babakaro, Ajahn Santajito, Ajahn Kirisaro, they all disrobed during that time. So there was a reticence to be committing to a new monastery right away, very quickly. So we weren't in a hurry. But by the time we got to May of 1995, then things were calming down. There was a bit more coherence, cohesion in the community. And at a Sangha meeting on May 31st, 1995, it was discussed about the idea of a California monastery, and the Sangha said, okay, Ajahn Amaro, we think things have come together sufficiently that you can go over there. Maybe you really should have 4 monks to start a new monastery, but you can go over there maybe with one other monk and start looking for a place. So I thought, oh, sadhu, sadhu. That was May 31st. June the 1st, so early the next morning, we got a phone call from Lumpur Sameta, who happened to be in Long Beach visiting Master Hua, who was extremely ill. And so I was walking down the corridor in the Monks Vihara. Ajahn Viradhammo called me into his room and said, Ajahn Amaro, we just got a call from Ajahn Sameto. Master Hua wants to offer us 120 acres of forest in California. What do you think about that? And I said, well, that was quick. So less than 1 day after the Sangha had agreed that we could start looking for land, Master Hua, literally from his deathbed, offered 120 acres of land for our community. So the search was very, very brief. There was no search at all, in fact. And that was the half of the land that now constitutes Abhayagiri. It's the northern half of the land that doesn't include the little cottage and what was the cottage and the original barn and so forth. So that was an incredible gift, totally unexpected, out of the blue. But then we came over for Master Hua's funeral in 1995. He passed away, and then we later that in July we gathered for his funeral at City of 10,000 Buddhas, and I took the opportunity to go and visit the land. And I think Fred Kral and Debbie and myself were taken over the land by Skip Blake, who was the realtor, who was a disciple of Master Hua, and climbed up the various trails through the creeks covered in poison oak, literally crawling under the manzanita bushes all the way up to the top of the ridge. I think we nearly killed Skip along the way. He was not really quite as young and spry as the rest of us. Debbie will, I'm sure, remember that particular adventure quite vividly. But anyway, it gave us a feeling for the land. There was no well, there was no electricity, no phone, and a washed out access road. So I thought, perfect. It's incredibly rugged. It's really steep, many kind of dry creek beds and convoluted corners of the valley. But I thought, for a forest monastery, this is perfect. This is a really beautiful wild forest, never really been logged to any great extent. Unfortunately, no water, no power, no access, no buildings, but details. So that was a wonderful gift. But we realized very quickly that we couldn't move onto the land. There was no water, so you couldn't even camp on the place. And so Master Hua, they'd owned the property for more than 12, 13 years, and they'd only ever camped for a few days, a few monks at a time, because of no water and very, very limited amenities there. So anyway, it became clear that if we wanted to develop the place, we needed to get some kind of a pied-à-terre, some sort of launch pad nearby. So we started to look around, and then we along the way, while we were exploring the property, we had inadvertently crossed over into what is now Casa Serena. That was the property belonging to Mary Curran and Peter Lariviere, Dr. Peter Lariviere. And we found one of the buildings on the land actually had a Thai Buddhist shrine and a Thai Buddha Rupa in this building on the land. So we thought, oh, well, at least the neighbors seem to be Buddhist. That's a good sign. And there was a Christian monastery also just next door. So we eventually got in contact with Peter Lariviere and Mary and said, are you interested in renting out your property, or could we possibly think about buying that, because we need to develop this land and we have to have a place to begin. And they said, no, this is our place. We're sharing it with 4 or 5 other families and people. So please, we're happy for you to be next door, but no, this is our place and we want to keep it. So then we approached the neighbor on the other side, which was a man called David Flum, and he had 128 acres with a little cottage and the garage and the strip of land that went all the way up to the ridge. And so he told us, and Sangapala was quite impoverished at that time. So the annual budget for Sangapala's entire activities was about $25,000 for everything, if I remember correctly. So it didn't have very much in the way of funds. But David Flum said, you can buy it or you can forget it. He wasn't interested in renting it. So that was what do we do about this? So, but it looked absolutely ideal. It's, where the main buildings are, where many of you are gathered right now. That was the property where David Flum was established. So it had water, it had some buildings, it had the access to the land, it had the main creek. So it was really perfect. It was what was sort of completed the sort of 2 halves of the bowl, but Sangapala had no money. So we thought, okay, well, let's ponder what we should do about this. And then a gentleman, Kun Jarun, a Thai gentleman who was a businessman, said, well, my business is quite prosperous and I'm happy to give you a loan for a couple of years, a few years, and so that you can use that to buy the property. So again, this is how I'm remembering it. So we thought, well, that'll be helpful. And the reason why it was a bit of an issue when we had to buy the whole property was because we very quickly found out that banks don't loan to churches. But we thought, well, it's California, you can put a little bit of a small down payment and then get a mortgage and pay that off. And then we found out very quickly, no, you can't. You have to come up with all the money to buy it, because banks won't loan to churches, because they will always, it's very difficult to foreclose on a church or a religious group. So we had, Sangapala had to find all the money to purchase the property. Anyway, so Kun Jarun stepped up, and so then Sangapala was happy to then start making arrangements, and they went into the purchase process. So during this time, again, not to get lost in too much detail, I went traveling with Lumpur Sumeto to India. He was responding to various teaching invitations. We went to Thailand, we were in Indonesia. And then along the way, I think when we were in Indonesia, we got a fax from Kun Jarun saying, terribly sorry, my business is not doing very well. I won't be able to lend you the money. My apologies. I hope that's okay. Right. So I was writing a lot of faxes during this time. Those of you who remember fax machines. But I didn't have any, I had a feeling that things would work out. I had no clue how they would work out. But Sangapala was already in escrow. So he had a commitment to buy this place and had very little in the way of funds. A couple of people had very generously donated quite a bit to move things along. if I can mention Suhinea and Judith Stronach, were both very, very generous and helped to oil the wheels substantially, but they still needed to find about another $140,000, which was not inconsiderable. It's like it was a very substantial amount of money to find. So anyway, traveling with Lumpur Sumedho, going here and there, wondering how things were going to work out. We went to Wat Pah Nanachat, and then there was a young American who was visiting Wat Nanachat, and he said, I hear that you're starting this monastery in California, and I had a house next door to my home that I was expecting my mother to use, but that's not going to be working out. So that house is now available for me to sell. If you need if you need any money for helping to purchase the land, I could loan you that for a couple of years before using the money to help my mother get established in a care home. So I thought, thank you very much. So that miraculously came through. He didn't know how much the house was going to sell for. He was in Thailand at the time. Cut a long story short, he went back to America, put the house on the market, the house sold, and it was just about the right amount together with the funds from the Sangapala had. It came to the purchase price for the land, which was $180,000, or just shy of $180,000. So that all came together by amazing, again, rather like Master Hua offering the forest a day after the Sangha agreed, even though a few weeks before Sangapala had very small amount of funds, they managed to close escrow only 2 weeks late. So it was originally supposed to close in the middle of May, and it closed at the end of May instead. And so on May 31st, which happened to be Visakha Puja, in San Francisco at Mark Lieberman's house, then a person very familiar to you, now known as Ajahn Kurunadamo, became Anagarika Tom on Visakha Puja, May 31st, so exactly 1 year after that Sangha meeting. And on June the 1st, we rolled wagons and loaded up with what possessions we had for Sangapala in terms of Dhamma books and shrine gear and a tea cozy. That was the first possession that Sangapala had as a monastic possession, was actually a tea cozy, acknowledging the British connections. And so June the 1st, we rolled up to Redwood Valley and moved on to the property. By that time, the only people that I knew, again, slightly miraculously, I'd been out to Mendocino County a few times over the years, usually to Fort Bragg and Casper to give teachings over there. So most of the people in Mendocino that I knew were on the coast, in Fort Bragg, in Albion or Casper, Cleone. And I only knew one family in inland Mendocino. And they were the Malans, if I can mention names, and they lived in Redwood Valley. So when we got the offer of the forest from Master Hua, and I saw the address, I thought, Redwood Valley, that sounds a bit familiar. I looked up in my address book, and lo and behold, there were the Malans in Redwood Valley. So they were very happy. We moved into their backyard. And by the time we rolled up to the little house on June the 1st, then I believe the Malans were already there, and Jeannie Bendick, who also was one of the board members of Sangapala for a long time, I think even the president for quite some time. It's all back in the mists of time now. Jeannie and Dee Cuthbert, and I think the Malans had all been scrubbing vigorously, tidying up the house and helping us to move in. So that was June the 1st, 1996. So that was how the whole thing came together. By the role of Lumpur Prasanno was that he had approached me a couple of years before, about 1994, and said that he was interested to leave Thailand. He was getting very wrapped up in the bureaucracy of the Sangha, and it was he really wanted to carry on living as a forest monk and not as a sort of as a public figure or as involved in the Sangha administration in the way that was happening in Thailand. And he asked if he could come and help out with this venture in California. he was a bit shy to ask. Maybe he told you that already when he spoke yesterday. He was a bit kind of hesitant. He's 5 years senior to me, and it was sort of my show, and he didn't want to steal my thunder, as it were. We're not allowed to steal as monks, so he was cautious of intruding on my patch, and so, but he sort of hummed and hawed a bit and said, would it be okay if I, offered to help out? And I said, yes, sadhu, thank you, great, fantastic. So I was extremely happy to have him on board, and I felt very, very confident that it was a good combination, because I'd literally known him since my very first week in the monastery in Thailand. Also, even though we have quite different characters, I'm very kind of wordy and kind of business oriented in terms of administration and collecting facts and living with agendas and minutes and meetings quite comfortably. And he was much less wordy and less of an administrator and more of a Dhamma practitioner and Dhamma teacher, that I can characterize us in that way. I felt that it was a really good mixture. He was quite quiet, and I was a kind of loudmouth, but he was extraordinarily inspiring and say committed as a Dhamma practitioner, very knowledgeable about community life, very knowledgeable about developing living places and community, and I hadn't had to be in a position of leadership to really be in that kind of a role in the past. So it was fantastic, really, for me to be able to draw upon his wisdom, his experience, his skill, his incredible clarity and commitment. So I was amazingly grateful that he volunteered to step up. And I had no difficulty whatsoever with him being senior, and we decided we'd try a co-abbotship. And also I borrowed a leaf out of Master Hua's book, because those of you who've been to pujas at City of 10,000 Buddhas will notice that when they finish the puja, they would they recite the names of Master Hua's teachers, and they include two monks who are called both called the Lord High Master of Three Conditions Monastery. So my understanding is when Master Hua was a novice, he was at a monastery with a co-abbotship. There were co-abbots of Three Conditions Monastery in Harbin in Manchuria, where he was a novice. And so I sort of thought, well, if he could have a co-abbotship. And he pointed out in a number of his teachings, he was really impressed how these two elders worked harmoniously together, and there was no jealousy or competition between them. So I thought, well, maybe Ajahn Pasno and I can do that, and let's give it a try and see what happens. So that was, we kind of, neither of us had done that before. We were sort of jumped in and hoped for the best, and I feel it worked out very, very well to the benefit of the community and also for each other, that we greatly enjoyed that collaboration. Over those early years, I also, along with people like Jeannie Bendick and Dee Cuthbert and Debbie Stamp, Susan Barber, I'd also like to mention Rick Williams was extraordinarily helpful. He was always around, lending a hand. Again, very, very quiet, but he was a can-do kind of a guy. When we were given the Buddha Rupa that sits on the shrine on the hillside, he literally drove his pickup up the hillside to help get the Buddha Rupa in place, if I remember correctly, and was very, very generous and helpful in those early years. Also, David Dawson. In the very first few days, myself, Ajahn Visuddhi, and then the then Anagarika Tom, now Ajahn Kurunadhammo, in the very early days, just the three of us living at the monastery, this local fellow, maybe a week or two after we'd arrived, this man sort of came and knocked on the door, came and visited, and it turned out his brother had been a bhikkhu in Sri Lanka. He himself was a Buddhist, and he, in conversation with him, he said, "I like to build huts and make pathways through the forest. If I can help out, just let me know." So I thought, well, thank you very much. That's, you couldn't have made it up, really. I mean, if he had made it up, no one would have believed it. But anyway, this local fellow who's a Buddhist, who builds huts and knows how to make trails so through this very steep, rugged landscape that we'd inherited. The group of us, Ajahn Visuddhi, myself, and Anagarika Tom, as he was then, Ajahn Kurunadamo, were not particularly practically gifted. Probably Ajahn Visuddhi had more building experience than the rest of us. Our entire toolkit was one small Swiss Army knife and a hammer when we arrived. That was our tool. That was our workshop. But it was enough to put up a post box and to get things going. Also, people gathered around. The Malans were incredibly generous with their time and tools and their help. Peter was very, very generous with lending a hand on the practical front. Richard Smith in Detroit cast around through his friends, told them that a monastery in California needed all kinds of tools and equipment. He literally filled up the back of his van and drove from Detroit to Abhayagiri, and then provided all kinds of good things like a table saw and a washing machine, all these, I think a drying machine, all these kind of good things. So during those first years, one of the things I thought I should also share is that the ethos that Ajahn Pasanno and I had, and also had developed, because I've been teaching in the Bay Area for about 5 or 6 years by that time. I first came in 1990, and my initial thought was, well, it's the Bay Area, and they have this kind of really colorful spectrum of spiritual teachings. They've got every kind of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Vietnamese Buddhism, the Ramdas and Vedanta, and the all kinds of colorful spiritual groups. Swami Muktananda over in Emeryville, on the East Bay. The Sufis and anything and everything, and the Christians next door. And so I thought I should provide this kind of colorful array of spiritual teachings. So when kind of the first year I came, and I suggested I could give talks on this and that and this and that, and one of the members of the Sanghapala board said, Ajahn, maybe if you just taught Theravada Buddhism, that would be great. But people didn't want to be entertained with a kind of spiritual smorgasbord of tasty delights, but they wanted the monastic-based classical Theravada Buddhist teachings and meditation guidance. And so that was really helpful. I mean, I have an eclectic kind of a mind, and I can dip my toe into all sorts of areas. But it was really clear that's what the group wanted, was monastic-based classical Theravada teachings, guidance in meditation, and to wanting to support and to be able to stay in a monastic environment in the forest. So by the time that Abhayagiri, the land was given, and Lumpur Pasanno came, which was like New Year of '97, about 6 months after I arrived with Ajahn Kurunadamo and Ajahn Visuddhi, it was really clear that what we were not trying to, it wasn't sensible to try and be all things to all people. But it was really, and both Lumpur Pasanno and I were really in accord on this. We just do this one thing and try to do it well. Create a Theravada forest monastery based on the teachings of Lumpur Cha and the forest Ajahns, based on Dhamma Vinaya as we've been trained, to live in kutis in the forest and to practice meditation and to live together harmoniously. Just do that. If people want to be part of that, they can come and join in. If they don't want to be part of that, if they want to do something else, then sadhu anumotana, please have a nice life doing whatever it is that you want to do. And I feel that was a really, I mean, I'm not sort of praising myself, but I feel that was a wise decision, because as many people who live in California or have lived in California, the Bay Area, things can get spread pretty thin, and you can get pretty scattered with all of the good and wonderful things available. And you can get kind of confused between Advaita Vedanta or Bhakti Vedanta with Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, mystic Christianity, Sufism and all and everything that's available there, and so that I feel that that was a wise decision, and I felt no regret over the time that I was there at Abhayagiri, and I'm very pleased to see things carrying on in that vein, because trying to be all things to all people, it comes from a kind of an idealistic position, but the practicalities and what's really valuable is just do one thing well. Do what you do what you know, do it well, and then those who have affinity with that or who can empathize with that, they'll draw close and they'll be benefited. And if there are people who can't benefit from that, or they don't like it, or it doesn't suit them, fine, there's X+1 other opportunities for them to draw upon. There's many other flowers in the garden. There's many other avenues for spiritual practice. So that that ethos also, I lived at Amravati for 10 years prior to coming to Abhayagiri, and we had at that time there were no kutis. Everyone lived in buildings with in rooms. This was a converted school. So one of the ethics of Abhayagiri and my kind of founding principles was no corridors. No rooms on corridors. Everyone's in a kuti, and we all live in the forest, and everyone's in a kuti. And so that was something I wanted to put in place. And again, Lumpur Prasanna was very much in accord with that. So that's what that dictated the style. So even though the land is really rugged and it's really hard work to put the kutis in the various different corners of the forest, and some people have got a long hike, like a half-mile hike and a 400 or 500 foot climb to get back to your kuti. That is also something that I feel has been a real benefit over time. And one of the things I said that it's a contrast to Amravati is in living at Abhayagiri, it's almost impossible to stay stuck in your head, because if you're up in your head, you'll fall off the path and roll down through the poison oak, and it'll be with you for the next 3 weeks. So you have to keep your mind and your body and your attention on the ground. Where are you putting your feet? And so that it's a very physical teaching. It's a physically demanding environment. Also, the heat of the summer and the temperature differential between night and day. You can't ignore your body. You're always putting on layers and taking them off during the course of a day. Here in England, I'm not criticizing England at all, but you can put on one set of clothes in the early morning, you wear the same stuff all day long, and you feel comfortable all day long. It's like the temperature, it doesn't vary that much. Whereas a Abhayagiri, that you're very, very conscious of being a body that's meshing with its environment, and the air temperature around you is continually changing. So that is another of the aspects of Abhayagiri life that I found was really helpful. So there's the steepness, the ruggedness of the land, the size of it, 280 acres of forest now. Oh, and the land across the road as well that's been acquired. There's a physicality to the life that's really helpful. It's kind of kaya upasana, mindfulness of the body, is an absolute necessity, and that's very good for people. The majority of people coming from a middle-class, intellectual-based life and education, it's good to have a need to come out of your head and be in your body, and to relate to Dhamma practice in a very engaged physical way. Also, it's not just a retreat environment, but also that the quality of community that is there is very much a part of community life. Many people who are coming along to events and teachings in the Bay Area, even after I talked about the monastery as a project over and over again for quite a few years, when we actually started Abhayagiri, and people realized, oh my goodness, so it isn't a retreat center. You can't come and do a retreat there. I said, no, it's a community. Oh, really? So what about retreats? I said, well, we'll do one retreat a year, one 10-day retreat, but we're not about doing retreats. We're a community. Like, oh, really? Oh my goodness. And isn't it inconvenient for you to be so far away from the city? You say, no, it's good that we're far away from the city. That means that people have to make an effort to get out there. You can't just, it's not something that you're tacking on to your ordinary everyday life as an urban Dharma buff, but you have to go to it and give yourself to it. It's deliberately not convenient. That's part of what it is. So you have to, those of you who are in the Bay Area, have to schlep up Highway 101 for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3-4 hours, depending on traffic. But that's good. There's an effort needs to be made to get there. So you're leaving your familiar zone behind, the kind of habits and attitudes that form your persona, your self-view of you as a city dweller. That has to be left behind by the long journey up the highway, or even across from Fort Bragg on the coast. It's an hour and a half winding through the hills to get there. So there's an effort that has to be made to arrive at that place of practice. Maybe the last area to talk about, I mean, there's many things I could talk about, how things developed over the from 1996 when I moved there to 2010 when I moved away. But one of the things I think is helpful is that, again, I didn't see the invitation to Amaravati coming. I didn't see the invitation to California coming, and I didn't see the invitation back to England. I knew that Luang Por Sumedho was keen to retire, and I thought about other people who might fill in. I was really well settled at the Abhayagiri, and I'm really enjoying collaborating with Luang Por Prasanno, and we had a great little thing going, and we just built our perfect kutis up in the forest, and the kind of ideal living spaces. Even had an indoor bathroom. Didn't have to have the usual mode for Abhayagiri kutis is a pit toilet out in the forest. So we had, and then hot and cold running water in the kuti, a toilet and shower in the kuti, with solar powered electricity and so on. So the perfect kuti, beautiful view over the valley. So it's just so perfect, so wonderful. I forgot that the thing that made it really perfect was that it was anicca. That was the final perfection, is that it's not permanent, and it's anatta. It's not mine. And so then it was in the latter part of 2009. I was with Luang Por Sumedho Wat Pananachat, and we just had a Sangha meeting there, and he said, the meeting had just come to an end, and he said, could you come by my kuti after the meeting? There's something I wanted to chat with you about. And I thought, we've been to Egypt together, we've been to the Arctic together, we've been to Japan together. Where next? Paraguay, the Galapagos, maybe Mongolia, who knew what I was literally thinking along those kind of lines. I wonder where he's been invited to now. Thinking it was like one of these sort of Dharma jaunts. Been to Bhutan together as well. So, or maybe we're going to China, mainland China. That would be interesting. So again, I was completely clueless. I went over to his kuti and he said, "I'd like to invite you to be abbot of Amaravati. What do you think about that?" Oh, well, thank you very much, Luang Por. So then I said, well, I think my first thought is I better have a conversation with Ajahn Pasno. So anyway, I felt very honored and touched that he would ask me to do that. I was, in retrospect, I really should have seen it coming, but I didn't. But anyway, I got the invite to do that, and so then the next morning, preparing for alms round, I think Luang Por Prasanno and I were putting our robes on, and I broke the news to him, and so just as I had felt, Luang Por Prasanno's first reaction was like, "Oh, well, I feel happy for Amravati, but that was a shame. I was enjoying that. We had a good thing going there, but it was about 13, 14 years we collaborated at Abhayagiri. But I felt, like Master Va, put your money where, well, we don't handle money, but put your monk where your mouth is. I thought we talk about anicca all the time. We talk about anatta, all dhammas are not self, that there is no owner to anything. So how possessive do I feel for Abhayagiri? Can I just pack up and leave? And so that was between that December when the invite came, and then we was still traveling for a bit, and it wasn't until I think end of January that I got back to Abhayagiri, and then we sort of broke the news to the Sangha that I had this invitation. I had to discuss with the Sangha at Abhayagiri whether they approved, whether they were going to let me go. That wasn't a sure thing, but they agreed. But then that 6 months of saying goodbye and packing up, that was a very interesting time, in the sense of ownership or history of like how much I'd been involved, or how much I'd presumed that I was going to be living in this kuti up in the forest, and that Lumpur Prasanna and I were both end our days on that hillside. Then realizing, well, that was just a presumption, and life is full of surprises. Let go, let go, let go. So it was a very kind of refreshing and interesting kind of practice. It was a feeling of shedding, letting go, giving away dozens of books. You can see that I'm still. I continue to attract books to me wherever I am. But we're leaving Abhayagiri, giving away to the public library and all sorts of different places, giving away lots of books, giving away things. And so when I left, I just had one small suitcase and my bowl and my robes. And that was what I left Abhayagiri with. And in July of 2010, and arrived back here in England at that time. But it was a kind of death experience, like a sort of. But as Lumpur Cha would say, die before you die, die God die. That I was identified with that. I had a sense of ownership or assumptions, and here it's going, it's leaving, it's cheerio, goodbye, farewell. And so there was a sense of loss, or a sense of shedding, but also almost in the same breath, a kind of spaciousness and a relaxation. So, there's a refreshing quality to that shedding, that letting go. And I feel that's very much the flavor of Buddha Dhamma, and I feel maybe that's a good thing to reflect when we are leaving things behind, our faculties of hearing, our intelligence, our memories, our homes, our partners, our jobs, our money, our reputation, when things leave, our mobility, our eyesight, our hearing, the things that we think are ours and who and what we are, as they go, then there is a sort of, oh, no, that one too, or, oh, I thought that was mine, or, oh, that there is that kind of quavering, or that flavor of grief in a way, as a tone of grief, but its partner is joy. It's like an in-breath and the out-breath, that they go together. And I feel that's very much the flavor of Buddha Dhamma. It's a bittersweet flavor. And that, yes, there's a bitterness to that letting go of what you thought was yours, or who and what you are, but there's a sweetness in exactly the same moment. That's the tone and the flavor of Dhamma, is a bittersweet quality. So people ask me, do you miss Abhayagiri? And I say, no, actually. I forget you exist most of the time, to be honest. And when people say, do you miss Ajahn Pasno? You were together for so long. And I say, no, when we're together, I'm happy to spend time with him, and we have a great time catching up, and we enjoy each other's company. But if he's not around, nothing is missing. And for some people, that feels really hard-hearted or callous, or or sociopathic. But it doesn't feel that way to me, really. And that, the fact that, to be honest, June the 1st passed by last week, and I totally forgot that it was Abhayagiri's 25th anniversary. The birthday went by, and it didn't even cross my mind. June the 1st on the calendar. So, not whether you find that refreshing or depressing that I completely forgot you. Personally, I take that as quite a good sign that I'm not so attached to the place that June the 1st is, the anniversary day is sort of inked in and sort of underlined 3 times in red, but just, no, it passed by, just an ordinary day at Amravati. And then it was Ajahn Kachana saying, Abhayagiri's got his 25th anniversary event. He's got 9 days of teachings. Did you know about that? And I said, no, I didn't actually. So, what are they doing? And I thought, oh my goodness, it's right, 25 years. It's June the 1st. That was a few days ago. And so I feel that sense of non-ownership that's one of the characteristics of Nibbana, akinchanam anadanam. When the Buddha said there is an island, it is a place of no thingness, it's a place of non-possession. Anadanam is non-ownership. I feel that's a place of peace, of not owning our living places, our relationships, our faculties, our ability to see and hear and even to think. If we establish that attitude of non-owning, then when it's around, we're quite happy for it to be there. And if it's gone, there's nothing missing. So that I feel that that sense of not missing you. Again, you might feel, oh, Ajahn, don't you miss me? Sometimes people will ask that. Did you miss me, Ajahn? And if I say, no, actually, I didn't. The people can be offended, but I mean that in a good way. It's like I'm not carrying people around. And or people will say, I bet you're really happy Lumpur Sumedho is back living in Amravati. I said, well, I'm very happy for him to be here. So, did you miss him when he was in Thailand? No. And that, again, people will think, how can you not miss Lumpur Sumedho? It's like, well, in exactly the same way. If he's here, I delight in his presence, but I'm not kind of counting the days till I can go and chat with him again, or I'm not fearing the day that he's going to die. It's like when he's around and when we're together, that's delightful and wonderful. But when the day comes that he dies or I die or there's another separation, that's the way it is. As he says over and over and over again, it's this way. It's like this. So I see that I've spoken for about an hour now, getting on for that. So I offer these words, these memories for people's consideration. And I also thank the many, I mentioned a few names, but also those whose names haven't been mentioned, who had many parts to play. Sadhu Anumodana. Also the many devas pulling all kinds of strings along the way. Whatever devas have been involved in helping this to happen, Sadhu Anumodana, and much appreciated. And may the first 25 years just be a tiny little moment in the long and beneficial future of Abhayagiri's presence in the world. Ewan.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Thank you to the Tech Devas for helping to bring this together. There was only a very slight delay between Ajahn Amro's voice and the picture, which threw us off only very slightly. But the Tech Devas, they mostly got it right there. And so, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Ajahn for sharing those thoughts with us. And let's see here. Okay, maybe we can move the camera to number 2. Here we are. Okay. And to end, if we could, maybe we can pay respects again to Ajahn Amaro.
If I may pay my respects to Luang Por Prasanno.
Please.
Great to see you, Ajahn.
So it's 10 o'clock in the evening here, so I will, I know it's only 2 in the afternoon there, so I will leave you to the rest of your day and your ongoing program.
Yes, thank you so much, Ajahn Amaro, for joining in with us here. It's an inspiration to all of us who are gathered and all the people who are plugged in on the online. So yeah, a lot of people have benefited from your thoughts, recollections. So sadhu.
And please feel free to correct anything that I misremembered.
Leave that to the editors later on.
Okay. Farewell.
Thank you. Farewell, Tenajin. So yes, we can take a break at this point, and this is the walking meditation period. So anybody who would like to do another forest walk, like we did this morning, you're welcome to, or just to keep sitting here, or do walking meditation in the cloister area, and we'll come back together at 2:45 for the sitting meditation. we'll take a 15-minute break and come back for the Q&A session.
Okay, so we will begin the Q&A session. We've got a few questions. We have one question from the group today who came here in person. How do you avoid falling in the trap of caring about something/someone too much and becoming attached to that something, someone at the same time? I think one of the classic standards is to pay attention to the sense of dukkha, and that sense of suffering, dis-ease that comes about, because it's and it's important to sort of recognize that the Buddha is not advocating not caring about anything, or that equanimity means indifference. Those are misapprehensions of the purpose of the Buddha's teachings. There's obviously a caring about things that is really important. And it's just like the aspect of, say, loving kindness, compassion. Those are attitudes of caring that are central to the Buddha's teachings, but they're also, they have to be balanced with a sense of perspective and kind of non-entanglement, and it's with that non-entanglement that one can really care for, have kindness, have compassion, and so that it doesn't come back and bite one. So it's really paying attention to the element of say, dis-ease, complication that can so easily arise in a sense of caring about something in terms of some principle or some ideal, or someone in terms of people in our persons in our lives, and also like just the aspect of one of the fundamental principles is generosity, and generosity is giving, so that giving oneself to situations, giving oneself to principles, giving oneself to people, giving oneself to things that are going to bring benefit, so that one has to give oneself. It's not, generosity is not just sort of writing a check or something. It's not a material thing. I mean, sometimes it can involve material things, but it's much more an attitude of mind, attitude of heart. So that that sense of giving, sharing, paying attention, one cares about things. But you have to be recognizing, is this creating suffering or not? Is this a part of the process of freeing the heart from suffering? So that also like one of the sets of dhammas that the Buddha gives is that are really part of the if say they're part of the sets of teachings that the Buddha gives that are called the kind of the wings to awakening, the Bodhipakkhya Dhammas, so that the four bases of success. And the first is a sense of in the Pali, it's Chanda. Chanda is desire. And so oftentimes you think, and desire in the sense of interest, desire in the sense of motivation, desire in the sense of caring about. If you don't have that kind of interest and desire and caring about something, you don't put effort, because that's the next quality as a base of success. There's four bases of Chanda, Virya, Ajito, Vimamsa. Chanda is desire, Virya is effort, Citta is application of mind, Vimamsa is reviewing, reflecting, investigating. And those lead to spiritual success. They lead to material success. So that one has to, care about. But if it's, if one's too entangled, if there's too much self involved, too much, too much me involved in it, then it'll it gets complicated really quickly. There's too much investment in terms of I need to have an outcome that is aligns with my preferences. That's going to create problems. There's going to be suffering. So it's just paying attention to dukkha, and not in the sense of isn't this so miserable? But it's more like, oh, look at that! I care about this, and I want to see this come about in a good way. But I'm getting so invested in it that it's making excessive complications and difficulty. So it's just being able to reflect and investigate. So that sense of being willing to acknowledge and adjust. How do I bring about a more because like the Buddha, when the Buddha says, say the source of suffering is desire, that is true, but it's a specific word, tanha, and it's desire that always has greed, hatred, delusion. It always has the entanglement of self. So it ends up in suffering. When the Buddha says, you need to, if you were looking for spiritual success and well-being, it's based on principles. First principle is desire. It's a different word, chanda. It's that sense of chanda, a sense of motivation, of interest, of engaging skillfully. So that being able, and sometimes it's qualified into like Dhamma chanda, desire for the Dhamma, kusala chanda, a desire for the wholesome, or desire that is based in the wholesome. So it's those are two different kinds of desire and two different kinds of results. So but in terms of how does one avoid falling into that trap, one has to be alert and attentive to how these different forces of desire work in the mind, and how do we support skillful, like lifting up skillful desire rather than thinking, oh, if I just, if I don't if I don't get involved enough and I shut down as much as I can, then everything's going to be okay. Nothing's going to hurt me. Well, no, it's not how it works. That's kind of painful way to live as well. So it's recognizing these balances. Okay, so then the next, go to the questions that came in the from the online people who are plugged in. How do we overcome regret and remorse associated with not being able to do good or meet our loved ones at the time of passing away? Well, I mean, especially during these days, I mean, I'm not sure what the situation is. And certainly that's a huge source of kind of painful experience of this pandemic. Many people have not been able to say their goodbyes to their relatives and loved ones, and that it's painful. But I think one of the things is being able to separate out between because it's one thing to have regret and remorse over something that you've been actively stupid about, but it's another when it's out of one's control, and then if you just to keep going round and around and around with something that was completely out of one's control, then that's a fruitless engaging of the mind, and of course there may be any number of things that say not being able to meet loved ones. It just may be a sense of circumstance where one is. I mean, these days, we're distant from many of our close relatives, friends, loved ones, just by the nature of the society, and sometimes it's where we are. We're just too far away to be able to act on that or to fulfill that. So a lot of it is looking how much are we have been engaged, and then even if we have been unable to be present, we can still bring to mind the option of directing our attention to loving kindness and a sense of well-wishing and a sense of a dedication of blessings, like really trying to bring to mind the good of people and good connection that we may have had, and dedicating blessings for their well-being. Those are things that can all be done. And so often the mind just seems to want to go back to regret and remorse, and so much of that is just one's own kind of obsession of self, and the I mean, there are skillful uses of regret and remorse in the sense of one acknowledging something unskillful or inappropriate that one's done, and then making a resolution to change because of that regret and remorse. That's a skillful use of it. Just continually going back to it and kind of torturing oneself with regret and remorse is an unskillful application of the mind. That doesn't accomplish much. So it's like really learning how to take that. Okay, that I wish I'd have done it differently, and actually make a resolution to do something different, make a difference in your life, make a change in your life, and that's a really skillful use of regret and remorse, so that it's really for one's own benefit and for the benefit of others, and that we always have that choice or that opportunity. So to recollect that and to encourage oneself in that direction. Okay, the second question. I struggle to find meaning in life. I don't want to find, in capital, the meaning of life, but just find more purpose, sense of feeling that what I do matters. I don't know what to do with my life as I am currently sick and will need to change how I live from now on, but right now I feel lost. I struggle to find what to do during my days and what to do in the future in terms of career or lifestyle. It was easier when I had routines and didn't have to think about what to do, yet I was not necessarily very happy. And in brackets, I actually felt quite depressed sometimes. What would be your advice to someone who feels lost as to what to do next in his or her life? I think it's kind of similar in that sense of recognizing that okay, I'm feeling kind of adrift right now, feeling not quite sure what direction to be taking, and acknowledging that, and then putting forth some effort in terms of well, this seems to be a good way to go forward, and because sometimes you don't have to find meaning in life to actually do something good. You already know what something good is already. Put the energy into that, and a certain clarity starts to come from that. If you want to figure it all out ahead of time, well, good luck. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's helpful to go ahead and recognize just the fact that this is a question that is coming from somebody who is plugging in online. It's good to recognize the reality is you're already making choices to do something good. If you have plugged into 25th anniversary of Abhayagiri to join that, you're already making choices that have some meaning and purpose. Given what options one has when one turns on the internet, the fact that you've plugged into the 25th commemoration of Abhayagiri, that's you're already actually a fairly rare segment of the population that's looking for meaning. There's a lot more distracting, interesting, fascinating things to be clicking on, and this is what you chose. So also give yourself some credit, and don't get too tangled up in having some kind of grand purpose, but recognizing that there are certain choices we can make each single day that incline us to generosity, to virtue, to being aware and mindful, that do reflect on the nature of actions and the results of actions, and the nature of the causes and results of well-being and happiness. So it's just as we direct our attention more, that gains momentum, it gains energy, and some clarity inevitably results from that. The next question. I struggle with restlessness. I always want to be doing something, and I often end up doing several things at the same time, so it's draining and not enjoyable. It's very difficult to stop, and when I stop, I don't know what to do, so I might grab my iPhone, clean stuff around, etc. I feel that we're always doing something, are we? Not sure what my question is, but could you talk about restlessness and how to do nothing, if that's actually possible? Well, I think, the problem is that restlessness, in the sense of that I'm dissatisfied here. If I go over there, that's gonna make me a bit happier. I'm not so satisfied with this. If I do that, then that's going to make me, if not happy, at least it'll be something that other than what I'm experiencing now. So that just recognizing that constant moving to try to gain some kind of gratification, satisfaction in some way, shape, or form. And I think one of the things is just being willing to just stop, even if it's just moment to moment, just a sense of stopping and saying, what am I missing right now? What am I lacking right now? And of course the mind will conjure up all sorts of things, but it's sort of, no, what's the actual feeling? And to pay attention to that impulse and recognize that as we, can I just be with that feeling of lack just for a minute? And can I just be with the simplicity of this moment, this circumstance, and not be projecting away, and what would I be missing or lacking in this? So it's an exercise in just being able to relax into this present moment and realize that it's actually safe to be in this present moment, in this present experience, in this particular mental configuration, physical configuration that we have right here. And so, oh yeah, okay. And it's just, and of course, the habits of mind are going to pull one out, but it's more like that conscious remembering, conscious recollection, conscious returning, that one gains a sense of increased confidence in oneself. because that the restlessness is always kind of driving us, is sort of pushing behind, and just to be able to relax into that and say, well, okay, that restlessness is also, that's not such a sure thing. That it doesn't have to drive me all the time. That arises and it passes away. That sort of, it kind of is like a wave that crests and falls. I can be with that, and then when all through that, just that experience, there can be a sense of clarity and ease, and that helps to. I mean, the mind is going to do what the mind does, but we can be present with it. Okay, fourth question. Why do we forget past lives? Well, I think it's a skillful evolutionary process that recognizes that even if we have, I mean, it's bad enough remembering just what we've done in this life. Having to remember past lives as well. It's just, I mean, think of the complication. I mean, okay, how much complication we do just what we remember from this life, and then if we had to do past lives, gosh, I mean, that's just too much. So I think it's a skillful evolutionary process that gives us a kind of a leg up on seeking for peace and well-being. Fifth question. A question about Dogen Zenji's teaching. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. Can you reflect on this teaching from the Theravada Thai Forest teachings? I think one, Zen Master Dogen is kind of the master of enigmatic kind of phrases and teachings, but this and oftentimes, say like Ajahn Chah and many other of the great forest masters, they're sometimes try to do is turn teachings on their head a little bit, or give a little bit of a twist or an angle that kind of, because what happens in, I mean, I would say what happens in religious teachings, but it happens in all forms of knowledge. We just get used to something and either expressing it or thinking about things in a certain way, and then we just keep plodding along that same track. And we never really get a fresh insight into it. So that for studying, particularly studying Buddhism, then it's important. That's the whole aspect of insight, is having a fresh insight into our human experience, and particularly in this teaching, say Dogen is pointing to the nature of self, and say to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the Buddha way is to study the, say, Four Noble Truths, study dukkha, study the self is forget the self. The whole teaching of not self. That's when the Buddha speaks of the teaching of not self, it's not a negation of self. It's recognizing that we carry around this whole identification with self, and it's a burden. So that, and to forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. It's like Ajahn Chah saying that everything is teaching us. Everything is a manifestation of Dhamma and truth. So it's all the actualized by myriad things. When we are able to relinquish or drop the whole self-program, then everything really is pointing out truth to us all the time. And it's Ajahn Chah, forest masters have all sort of pointed to that. And say your body and mind as well as the bodies and minds of others drop away. That's very much say when you think of the very first insight into into truth, or the very first fetter that falls away is Sakkaya Ditthi, identification with body and mind, identification with the five khandhas as being self, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, as being self, belonging to self. And that drops away, and one realizes that one is not the whole aspect of one's own being, as well as all beings, didn't really have an enduring essence at all. Never had, never will. And everything falls away. It doesn't mean that's a negation. It's putting things into perspective, so one isn't locking people into, and the world into, some objective identity, and one is not locking oneself into an objective identity. One can respond with awareness, clarity, wisdom, and discernment, because that's all that remains, and sort of that this no trace continues endlessly, and that's the that no trace, that sense of there is, rather than being that fixating on thingness and otherness, and solidifying or reifying experience. It arises and ceases, and one sees things in their true nature, and it doesn't negate. That is where we can respond with real wisdom. We can respond with real compassion. And so that's. So I don't see any. Say the essence of teachings that point to liberating insight are tend to have a similarity to them. Okay, the sixth. Okay, this is just a comment. It's wonderful to see and hear Ajahn Sudanto again. I miss him so much. Thank you for the appearance. Felt like a real gift. 7, I'm lucky not to have any obligations, such as taking care of a family, making money, working, etc. But I don't know what to do with my life, as if obligations were what gave life meaning, or at least what helped guide my life. Always wondering what to do with my life next is a bit tough. How would you suggest I approach a situation where I could do many things, yet I don't know what to do? How do you figure out what to do with your life when you have too much freedom? Not sure if freedom is the appropriate word to use here. Thank you. It is in the kind of the Western sense of it, and particularly the American sense, because freedom is kind of like the ability to make your own choices. And yes, I mean, people bind themselves with their own choices, and it's not so much freedom. But I think this question was answered from that previous one, the second one about, say, struggling to find meaning in life. But I think that just recognizing that, we can make choices that are skillful. We can make choices that are based on what is skillful, what's beneficial. And it's those skillful choices that bring a certain satisfaction. And also, sometimes people are so bound up with themselves that I think it's helpful to be engaging in some kind of service or giving or sharing or doing something that connects one with other human beings. We get so tangled up in ourselves that it's it weighs us down. Okay, the 8th question. In our worldly life, we always have expectation on things that we do. What will be the best way for us to change this habit and do everything without any expectation? I think it's not that we don't have expectations, but I think it's like, we at Jnanico organized this 25th anniversary practice session, and there's kind of an expectation that it would be beneficial, and there's certainly a hope that that'd be the case, but it's also being able to hold it, say, in parallel with the fact that, not a sure thing. Never quite sure how it's going to turn out. I mean, I think it's turned out wonderfully, but it's not a sure thing. So being able to hold that uncertainty with it, so that expectation is because we need to be able, in the same way that I was talking about that set of teachings that the Buddha gave, that the basis of spiritual, material success begins with desire. So there's a certain desire, expectation, but it's more like motivation or interest. One has and when it's rooted in a, say, wholesome, skillful, to a certain degree unselfish motivation, it'll tend to have a good result. It's just, it's how the world works. It may or may not. I mean, there's many factors that are going to happen, are going to be factored in, but in general, I think one of the things is not tying oneself too tightly with some concrete result, but being able to pay attention to the process of our intention, the process of our effort, the process of our kind of taking an interest in monitoring how it's playing out, how's it working. And when we do that, then we can we can actually take a lot more interest in it and bring more skillful desire to it, rather than tethering it to some concrete, solid expectation. And so being able to recognize, it's kind of interesting adventure we're on, this human life, and take it from there. Last question is, does Luang Por Pasano know what happened to Ajahn Visuddhi or Christine Lee? I think Christine might be in Thailand. Thank you. I didn't. I wasn't sure where Christine was. These are for people who don't know. They were here. Ajahn Visuddhi was along with Anagarika Tom, Ajahn Grundamo, and Ajahn Amaro were the first people, and then Christine showed up very soon after the and stayed here for many months. So, but I've lost touch with her a long time ago. Ajahn Visuddhi left the robes, 15?
It was just before our 10th. It was just because we brought him back for our 10th.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, it would have been 15 years ago.
About 15 years ago. He left the robes about 15 years ago, and then he's been living in London, and from time to time they hear from him at Amaravati, so he is still around. And that's the end of the questions, and that's 4:30. So.
So one of the closing chants we can do is the just as rivers on page 50 of book 1, chanting book volume 1. So we'll do that chant, and then we'll follow it with the verses of sharing an aspiration in English on page 33. And this just as rivers chant, this is the meal blessing that we do, so you get a translation of it in this chant. Does anybody know if the book's put out? Okay, great.
No, I was.
She was looking for a chanting book. Yeah.
Oh, that nourishing roots. If you let people know.
Yeah, I'll announce that again.
Yeah.
Yata varivaha pura paripurendi sagarang, just as rivers full of water entirely fill up the sea. Evam eva itotinang petanang upakapati. So will what's here been given bring blessings to departed spirits. Ejitang patitang tumhang. May all your hopes and all your longings Kemameva samicchatu come true in no long time. Sabbe purrendu sankappa. May all your wishes be fulfilled. Chando pamaraso yata. Like on the 15th day of the moon. Mani chotirraso yata. Or like a bright and shining gem. Sapitio vivajantu. May all misfortunes be avoided. Sambaroko vinasatu. May all illness be dispelled. Mate bhavad vandarayo. May you never meet with dangers. Sukhi dikayuko bhava. May you be happy and live long. Abhiwadana sili sanichang utapachayino.
for those who are respectful, who always honor the elders. Jataro Dhamma vadanti, ayuvano sukhang balang. 4 are the qualities which will increase life, beauty, happiness, and strength. Bhavatu sapamangalam. May every blessing come to be. Rakhantu sabba devata. And all good spirits guard you well. Samma buddhanupavena. Through the power of all Buddhas. Sanda soti bhavantu te. May you always be at ease. Bhavatu sabba mangalang. May every blessing come to be. Rakhantu sabba devata. And all good spirits guard you well. Samba dhammanubhavena. Through the power of all dhammas. Sanda soti bhavantu te. May you always be at ease. Bhavatu sabba mangalam. May every blessing come to be. Rakhantu sabba devata. And all good spirits guard you well. Samba sanghanubhavena. Through the power of all sanghas. Sanda soti bhavantu te. May you always be at ease.
And page 33. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration.
Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled.
And we'll close by paying homage to Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and then after that I'll make some announcements. Arahang Samma Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammang Namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sanghang Namami, I bow to the Sangha. Okay, so I'll just make a few announcements. One is that